Hello again, Martin Cohn from topratedwebhostings.com. In today's short video, I wanted to firstly introduce answering a couple of questions which I have been asked quite a great deal about. So it's going to be very short, very to the point, and I'm going to be talking about VPS hosting, what is hosting, and different types of hosting. Now, before I continue, of course, as usual, for those of you wanting to find out more information and be regularly updated with new videos, please hit that subscribe icon on the bottom right of the video, hit the bell to be notified, and that way you'll be always up to date on new videos. Now, the first question in simple terms, what is hosting? Now, often hosting is done in the format of VPS or virtual private server hosting. Now, virtual private server hosting is the middle ground between shared hosting and dedicated server hosting. Now, having an account in a shared hosting environment generally means that your hosting account is sharing the same physical address or physical server as many other customers, oftentimes several hundred of them. This means there are less overall resources that are available to every individual account. However, it's still very suitable for small business and personal websites. For those of you who have actually outgrown that particular model and who have masses and masses of traffic and visitors to your website, you do need a little bit of extra space and or power. This is where VPS hosting comes into play. Now, VPS or virtual private server hosting means that you'll still be sharing a physical server with others. However, you will only have a very small amount of neighbors on your site. So you're not going to be sharing it with hundreds of people. You may be sharing it with, say, 20 or 25 people or even less. Now, as such, you'll have a far greater share of the server's resources, such as bandwidth, central processing unit power, storage space, and memory. Now, VP hosting accounts also run as their own individual installations on a server rather than you all sharing the same singular system, as is often the case with shared hosting accounts. Now, this means that you can achieve far greater customization of your hosting environment and will have access to a higher level of hosting management tools and settings. So basically, you'll have most of the benefits of a dedicated server of hosting, but without that really high cost when you're going as the user of a single server. So you've got general shared hosting, which is relatively cheap, and then you've got virtual private server, which is where you are sharing the same server with with much less people than you would otherwise have, so you get much greater access to their resources. Makes a lot more sense in terms of being able to run a more highly powered website. Now, one final question is, a lot of people actually ask me, where am I better off hosting? Am I better off hosting in the UK, in the US, in Singapore, in Australia, etc.? Now, sometimes wherever you're actually hosting, obviously it's going to be quicker to access a server that's local than, for example, if you're hosting everything in the United States, but most of your customers are in Australia. If you're hosting in that configuration, it's actually going to take them a little bit longer, possibly another second or two, to download all the information they need from your site based in the US if they're in Australia. Now, some very large organizations will actually have multiple hosting of the same website, but on different servers around the world. In the case of Australian web hosting, I'm actually going to say that a lot of the decision-making process is about finding a reliable host. And of course, all of the web hosts that I talk about on my website, topratedwebhostings.com, are hosts that I have used or continue to use myself and can recommend. I have used particular hosting companies that, let's just say, I wouldn't and don't recommend. I've had unfortunate experiences, technical problems, slowness, etc. If I've not had a good experience, there is no way I'm going to be sharing that particular recommendation with any of you, because why would I recommend something for you that hasn't worked well for me? Now, essentially, if your customer base is largely Australian, they're going to be able to load your website or application faster from an Australian server than if they must wait for the data to be sent across from an offshore hosting provider, i.e. Singapore, the UK, the US, etc. Obviously, if you're based in the US, you're better off going with the US host. Now, I should point out many of the larger hosting companies will actually, on sign up, give you the option of selecting which data centers you want to be working from. So when, for example, I signed up some of my websites with TMD hosting, they actually specify specifically, okay, you can select Singapore. They don't have, in fact, no, that's not correct. They do have servers in Australia as well, because I do remember I selected Sydney as the server point for TMD hosting on the sites that I've got hosted with them. I've got some other sites before they'd introduced the Sydney option where I selected Singapore. And of course, they will also have the options for the United States and the United Kingdom. There could be others, but I don't remember because I didn't pay attention to those particular ones. I've always chosen the major markets that have suited my particular clientele, as of course you would do with yours. However, load time is not the only benefit if you're choosing an Australian host. Another major consideration should be the time zone that your host's support team are going to be working from, and that applies whether it's Australia or elsewhere. If you choose a provider who is across the other side of the world, your business hours may occur during your host's nighttime. Now, while this on its own is generally not going to be a major problem, it may mean if that something does happen to your website during your peak hours, that your hosting company's peak hours are actually, well, about 12 or 15 hours away. And you may only have access to 1 or 2 support people on duty rather than a whole team of them. So it can take a little bit longer to get a particular issue resolved. It can be a critical factor if you're an extremely busy website with a very high load of people. However, in the majority of cases, it's probably not going to be a particularly big problem, particularly if you're a small website, small business, or even an individual just starting out with your first website. And remember, every website that starts small can become a whole lot bigger and more powerful over time. And all of the hosting options can be upgraded from introductory packages to much more complex and fancier packages as well. So there you have it for today. Hopefully I've answered a few extra questions for you, and certainly look forward to putting forward the next video in the next few days for you. Stay well, be on top, make sure you sell something today. Have an awesome day. Cheers. Martin from topratedwebhostings.com.